Look, I want to introduce our first guest speaker today, and we were so lucky to be able to secure her for this webinar. She is a nationally recognised expert in regional, rural and remote tourism, and she actually spent 7 years as a director on the board of Australian Regional Tourism. So she certainly knows what she's talking about on a mass scale. Through her tourism consultancy today, which is called Tilma Group, our guest speaker supports operators and destination managers with their mentoring and their industry development workshops. And she's been a regular presenter at lots of seminars and conferences at a national and state and regional level over the years. And I would be surprised if some of you haven't heard this wonderful lady speak in the past. She's also more recently founded an online event management training program, and that actually helps build the capacity of regional and rural event organisers, and all of the sessions are delivered brilliantly through live and on-demand webinars, so people can do it at their own pace when it's appropriate for them, rather than not having access to it because they're not in the right location. So it is my great pleasure now to hand you over to our first speaker, Linda Tilman. Welcome to the Community Builders.
I hope everybody can hear me. This is a new platform for me, but just give us a shout out if there's any issues. Excellent, thanks Lindsay. Okay, so this afternoon I'm going to talk to you quickly and allow enough time for questions and discussion around this particular topic, because it's something we could talk about for hours. It's something I'm really passionate about. And as Lindsay said, my core focus with Tilma Group is around working with regional and rural communities across Australia. So I hope to share with you today some case studies and examples of rural communities that I've had the opportunity of working with over the past 15 years. So what I'm going to do over the next 10 to 15 minutes is talk to you about the opportunity that is currently presented to rural communities. Thank you, COVID. So I'm going to talk you through what that opportunity looks like. And then what I'm going to focus on is sharing with you 5 ways, and there's many more than 5, but I'm going to focus on 5 ways that rural communities can take advantage of this opportunity that we currently have. I'd also love to take your questions. So at any point, if you've got any questions, or if you'd like to throw any discussion points up, or you've got your own examples, please put them in the chat box. And just one little piece of housekeeping. I do have to acknowledge Tourism and Events Queensland for the use of their images on my slides. So all of these images are from my region, which is southern Queensland. I'm based on a property just south of Toowoomba. I'm pretty much midway between Toowoomba and Warwick in the very dry southern Queensland country. Okay, let's get stuck into this. Sorry, I'll just get this slide. So the opportunity, as we've all been hearing, and particularly in the last couple of days, thank you, Hamish and Zoe Blake, we now have some exciting domestic tourism activity happening across our country. So although we are in a crisis, we are coming out of a crisis, we're all facing different challenges, and the tourism industry has absolutely been hit extremely hard. The exciting opportunity for us is that we now have the spotlight on domestic tourism. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for Australian communities, particularly regional and rural communities, to tap into domestic visitation. As you may have heard, the government has announced a $250 million regional tourism recovery package, and that is all about encouraging domestic travel and making up for the shortfall that's going to be caused by a lack of international visitors. In addition to that, Tourism Australia has also received over $230 million for marketing to help specifically push domestic tourism. And for those of you that aren't aware, that is really exciting, because us people that work in regional tourism in Australia with a very core focus on domestic tourism, we've been somewhat frustrated that Tourism Australia is very much internationally focused and perhaps has missed an opportunity with domestic tourism. So this is now a forced opportunity for us as a country at a federal level, working down to state and regional, to really focus on sharing those untapped gems that we all know that we have in regional and rural Australia with our own people. So if you haven't yet had a chance to have a look, I encourage you to jump online and check out the latest campaign that's been launched with Tourism Australia. Our latest ambassadors are Hamish and Zoe Blake, and they're going to be focused on uncovering and promoting the amazing regional and rural parts of our country. So there is a very, very exciting opportunity for us right now. In addition to that, drive, tourism, and road trips is absolutely where it's at. And I just want to share with you, I'm not going to get bogged down in data because that's not what we're here for today, but it's really important to give the context around what this opportunity looks like. The latest tourism data that's been released by Tourism Research Australia is really demonstrating that there's a lot of pent-up demand. And I'm sure everybody's experiencing that themselves. I mean, we all want to go on a holiday. We want to get out. We want to go and connect with our family, our friends, and we want to go and experience some time out. So there's a lot of pent-up demand for travel, and particularly domestic travel. We had more than 5.4 million domestic visitors travelling throughout Australia in that latest period, and the majority of these visitors are travelling intrastate to regional locations. In addition to this, we're seeing significant growth in caravan, RV and camper trailer sales. I know myself, I don't know how many of our friends in the last even 3 months have gone out and bought a camper trailer because they want to start going and exploring and doing short trips and uncovering other places not too far from home. So as I said, drive tourism, road trips is absolutely where it's at for us in terms of the tourism opportunity that sits in front of us right now. The same figures show that regional tourism rebounded by over 1 billion in the month of June. So that's exciting. The opportunity is there. It's now about how do we actually maintain that, and how do we as smaller rural communities get a piece of that? What do we need to do? I know in my region in southern Queensland, we're currently experiencing record bookings and also forward bookings. So a lot of accommodation operators are saying they have never in their lifetime seen forward bookings over summer that they're seeing right now. So that's really exciting. And I'd love to hear from everybody. You know, pop it in the chat. I'd love to hear what you're currently experiencing. Are you seeing more or less travellers? I know a lot of communities are seeing different types of travellers, particularly outback Queensland. And Steve, I know you're on the session today from Birdsville. I'd love to hear from you. But, you know, a lot of our more remote and rural communities are starting to see a different type of traveller. I was up in Charters Towers recently, and there's an operator up there, and he has a lot of Victorians that come up during the winter period, which is quite typical for outback Queensland. However, because of the border closures with our state, he was experiencing a complete new market. So a lot of Queensland visitors and families with younger children that were starting to get out and explore other parts of our state. So I'm really interested if you're hearing, you know, or seeing any differences as we're starting to come out of this crisis. And I'm also curious to hear, if you're prepared to share in the chat, what you and what your community has actually been doing in this downtime. We've all had some forced downtime. I know myself, my business is totally dependent on the tourism industry. So I've had some downtime myself, and I also work a lot in events. And, you know, we know that the events industry is perhaps going to be the worst hit, the last to close and probably the last to come back. So what have you been doing in your forced downtime? I'd love to hear. So, sorry, I'm a little bit slow on these slides, just getting my controls right here. So what do these intrastate Aussie travellers want? There's a lot of research coming out, and there's a lot of forecasting being done in terms of what are the post-COVID travel trends going to look like. So to give us a bit of a sense of what travellers are going to be looking for as we come out of COVID, there's a few things. They're wanting something to look forward to. So a lot of people are keen to plan and book a holiday. And in addition to that, there's greater intentions around planning for obvious reasons. So we're not taking travel for granted as much as we used to. So we're taking a lot more time to plan our holidays and our experiences. Consumers are also starting to seek out simplicity. They're looking for simple, meaningful experiences. From an events perspective, it's a very interesting space, and that's still evolving every single day. But what we're actually hearing with events is that there will be more of a trend towards smaller boutique style events as compared to what we would be used to with mass gatherings. There's obviously going to be increased requirements around health and safety. There's also some talk that grey nomads may be a little bit slower to return to travel. And I think that's something we need to be very mindful of, because a lot of us in rural communities have been very dependent on our really solid grey nomad market. And I'd be interested to hear, have you seen any trends in your community with the grey nomads? The other thing that they're talking about is that cities will actually be the least appealing destinations. So this is our opportunity. This is the opportunity for regional and a rural Australia to shine. And it's very exciting that the government is supporting and backing that. So now what I want to talk about is, how can we actually turn this crisis into an exciting opportunity for you, for your rural communities? And I'm working with a number of rural communities at the moment looking at exactly this. And it's very exciting. And there's a whole range of things that need to be considered. And I'm just going to touch on a few points quite high level. So once again, I encourage you to jot down your questions or reach out to me at a later date. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or have further discussions. So the first thing you need to do as a rural community is to identify who is leading tourism in your community. Because one thing I find in our rural communities is we have passionate people and we have passionate groups, but often we're a little bit disjointed. So we need to find the lead horse, if you like. Who is that going to be, or who's currently leading tourism in your community? Is it your Progress Association? Is there a specific community organisation? I know in a community that I worked in recently, it was actually community health that was taking the lead on tourism and events. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones that has access to a tourism officer within a council. Maybe it's the business chamber. So you need to identify who is that lead organisation or lead community group that's actually taking that responsibility of tourism. Because what I find is, if you don't have that lead, there's often kind of challenges around getting projects moving forward and getting things happening. And I know Josie, just having spoken to Josie throughout the week from Harrow, and we'll hear from her soon, she's absolutely a leader in tourism in her community. And what you need to do is, once you've got your leader, is talk to them about getting everybody working together. Collaboration and teamwork is absolutely vital. The next thing you need to think about is, who is your market? And you may think you know your market, and I love to challenge communities on this, and this is a really interesting exercise for you to undertake, but do you really know your market? I mean, know them intimately. And as I said before, a lot of common markets, or a common market for a lot of our rural communities, are the grey nomads, or what we refer to as the older tourers. But start to think about those that aren't coming that could have a good fit with your community. Think about families, think about VFRs, think about niche type visitors. And you need to think about their different needs and expectations, because families are obviously going to have different needs and expectations to our grey nomads. So you need to know your market intimately and start to be focused on that market if you can. The other thing is, we try sometimes to be something for everybody, and that can dilute our product and it can dilute our message. And then we start to get confused and we put out confusing messages. The next thing you need to do, once you know your market, you need to know what you have to offer visitors. Start to look really closely at what product and experiences you have to offer. And there's a very important message here. A lot of people think, when we talk about your product and experience offering from a tourism perspective, a lot of people think we need a Stockman's Hall of Fame, or we need an Age of Dinosaurs museum, or we need a big banana. You don't need to build $1 million infrastructure to create an experience. Look around you, look around at what you already have in your community. And sometimes it can be your people. It can be your story. It's not always built infrastructure. So I want you to think about, what do you have to offer visitors? And if you know your visitors well, you know them intimately, you will be able to determine what you have to offer them. So I always encourage people to do a bit of an audit. Sit down and have a brainstorm and think about all those things that you have, your natural assets, your events, you know, your people, the stories that you have to offer. And then you need to start to link those to the markets or to the visitors that we are focusing on in your community, or that you're focusing on in your community. And you'll start to see whether you've got any gaps. And that's where you can look at opportunities to attract, you know, investment, or to attract community interest in developing new products and experiences. Now, the next thing you need to do is work with your neighbours. Collaboration is absolutely critical for regional and rural tourism. And we hear that a lot. I know this collaboration word, some people are like, it's not the C word, but we want to be able to join the dots, because our visitors don't necessarily know borders, and a lot of us are in small communities. So we need to have that density, what we call density of product, to be able to give people a reason to come and visit us. And you need to remember that sometimes your small town is often part of a larger journey. So start to think about, where do you fit within that visitor journey? And this is where we start to talk about things like trails, bundling and packaging. So starting to bring things together to create an experience. Sometimes one thing on its own is not an experience, but if you combine, say, you know, a local zoo. So I'll give you an example. I'm currently working in a rural part of southern Queensland, and we have some product that's cross-border. It's across 2 regional council borders, and it's about 4 or 5 small rural communities. And we're currently going through the process of getting them to collaborate, because when they collaborate, they've got a zoo, they've got agritourism experiences, they've got a calendar of something like 40 or 50 events across the year. They've got amazing coffee shops, they've got retail shops. So when we start to bring those 4 or 5 communities together and we start to do that audit, all of a sudden we've got this exciting density of product, and we can start to create itineraries, trails, marketing campaigns that are a more compelling proposition for potential visitors. So start to look beyond your borders and start to think about how you can start to create those regional experiences. Then we've got to do cross promotion, and don't forget as well, just to do regular networking with our neighbours, because we don't know what opportunities may come up just by having those conversations. Another example, I'll just get you, I won't go into the detail in this because I'm conscious of time, but when you've got a moment, have a look, just search up canola trail. And I don't know if there's anybody on the session today that's from the Riverina region in New South Wales, but this was a project that I worked on some 5 or 6 years ago, where there's 3 councils, 3 rural councils, Junee Council, Coolamon Shire Council and Temora Shire Council, and we collaborated brought those 3 councils together to create Canola Trail. Have a look at it. It's exactly what I'm talking about, where we create this collaboration and can have density of product. And I'd also love to hear if you've got any collaborative projects that you've worked on, please share them in the chat box. It'd be really interesting to see. And just finally, my final point is we have to remember to tell our stories. I don't know how many communities I work with in regional Australia where they just think, oh, I've got to build a museum, or we need new product. You know, we don't have enough to share with our visitors. But when I start to dig and I start to do an audit and I start to look, they actually have a lot of stories. They have a lot to offer, but sometimes they forget to share it. And I know that sounds really silly, but have a think about it. How are you actually telling your story? Simple things like, do you have a website? And I'm talking even a simple 2 or 3 page website, because we can't deny the fact that people are Googling what to do when they're in your region. We need to be using, you know, TripAdvisor, Google My Business, ATDW, the Australian Tourism Data Warehouse. Check that out. It's another opportunity, particularly in most states where that's free. You know, there's a lot of social media. and learn how to use social media. And I know it's hard, it's really time consuming, it's forever changing, but if you do have the opportunity to tap into some funding that's available, you might be able to engage a professional to help with that. And once again, collaborate with some neighbouring councils to be able to do it. I also encourage you to link in with your tourism bodies, so your local council, your regional tourism organisations, state tourism organisations, there's tourism industry councils. There is a bundle of resources out there. So if you're a small community thinking, how do we really embrace this tourism opportunity? Start networking, start reading content that's out there, because there's a lot of free webinars, newsletters, and educational resources that exist. Another one, and you might laugh at this, but a great way to promote what you have to offer and to tell your stories on the back of your public toilet doors and places like petrol stations. So think about those distribution channels for our road trippers. People are traveling and they might just be passing through your community. How do you tell your story if they're just stopping to go to the toilet, grab a cup of tea, or just stretch their legs? And my final tip is, don't be scared to use professionals. If you need to engage a PR company or engage a professional agency to capture stories, photo and video, I really encourage you to do that, because we can't deny the fact that good quality visuals help tell our story. So make sure that you're doing what you can to share that story with all of your potential visitors. So thank you all so much. I'm more than happy to take questions when appropriate. I'll hand back to Lindsay, but also don't forget that there's a great resource online, and I believe that that's being shared in the handouts section on Demio today. So make sure you have a look at that, because that's also got some great tips and case studies and resources for rural communities wanting to embrace the tourism opportunity.